Number A. Single father found a strange bolt. Under the engine, then uncovered a $19M insurance scam. Number Part 1. The man who fixes things. The garage smelled the way Marcus Hale had come to love without meaning to: motor oil, cold concrete, the faint copper bite of brake fluid. It was the smell of problems that could actually be solved. He appreciated that more than most people would understand. He was 38 years old, broad-shouldered in a way that came from work rather than vanity, with hands so consistently stained around the knuckle lines that no amount of solvent fully cleared them anymore. He wore dark blue coveralls, with a sewn patch on the left chest that said, Maintenance Brooks Dynamics. The title was accurate. It also told you nothing. By day, Marcus Hale cleaned garages. He swept. He mopped. He organized shelves of lubricants and hydraulic fluid, and replaced fluorescent tubes when they flickered and died. He was courteous to the executives who walked past him without looking. He was invisible in the way that men in his position are almost always invisible, not because there was anything small about him, but because the people around him had decided not to see. By night, he worked out of a rented bay 3 miles from the Brooks Dynamics campus, fixing vehicles for neighbors and strangers who had found him through word of mouth. Transmission rebuild. Bent axle. Electrical fault that 3 other mechanics had called unfixable. Marcus fixed things. It was the one constant in a life that had seen its share of constants taken away. His daughter's name was Lily. She was 8 years old, gap-toothed in front, and currently in the process of memorizing every line of a 20-minute school play about the American prairie. She had been reciting it to Marcus each morning over cereal, and he had been listening with the particular attention of a man who knew that this ordinary small ritual was not ordinary at all. He had almost missed all of it. His wife, Diane, had died 4 years ago, a pulmonary embolism, fast and without warning, on a Tuesday in November. Marcus had been in the garage when it happened, not the Brooks Dynamics garage, but his own, the one he'd rented back then with a vague dream of owning something. He'd come home to Lily sitting on the porch steps in her pajamas, not crying, just waiting, because she didn't fully understand what the ambulance had meant. He understood. That was the problem. He understood completely. After Diane, Marcus had left his position as a military vehicle mechanic, a civilian contractor role that had taken him far from home too often. He'd taken the janitorial position at Brooks Dynamics because it came with health insurance and a schedule that ended at 4 o'clock. Lily needed him home. That was the whole calculation. Everything else, the demotion and status, the paycheck that was a fraction of what he'd earned before, the long hours of invisible work, was just arithmetic around the central fact of his daughter. He didn't complain. He was not, by nature, a man who complained. The night it started was a Thursday in March. Rain had been falling since mid-afternoon, the kind of heavy, purposeful rain that finds its way through every collar and seam. The executive garage at Brooks Dynamics was underground, which meant it was dry, but the dampness had crept in anyway, a cold, close feeling that made the fluorescent lights seem dimmer than usual. Marcus was finishing his evening sweep when he noticed the SUV. It was a black Cadillac Escalade, the company vehicle assigned to Elena Brooks, the CEO. He knew it the way he knew every vehicle in that garage, not from closeness to the woman who drove it, but from the work of maintaining the spaces those vehicles occupied. He'd seen it every weekday for 2 years. Tonight it was sitting 2 degrees wrong. Not dramatically, not in a way that most people would have registered, but the front right corner was lower than it should have been, and there was a small dark patch on the concrete beneath the engine block that was fresh enough to still be spreading at the edges. Marcus set down his mop. He crouched beside the SUV, ran one finger through the edge of the patch, and brought it to his nose. Engine oil. But the viscosity was off, lighter than it should have been from a standard leak. This was fresh oil, mixed with something else. His jaw tightened. He got down on his back and slid under the vehicle. The undercarriage of a 2022 Escalade was familiar territory. He'd worked on 3 of them in his private bay. He knew the geometry of the suspension, the routing of the brake lines, the logical architecture of everything beneath. What he found did not belong to that architecture. It was a single bolt, threaded into the brake line mounting bracket near the rear left caliper. Not the original hardware. Not even close. It was slightly larger, machined differently, with a hexagonal recess that Marcus recognized before he fully understood why he recognized it. He stayed under the car for a long moment. The bolt was from a batch of modified fasteners he had last seen 8 years ago, during his final year of military contracting work. They were components from a small manufacturer out of a facility in western Pennsylvania, a company that had quietly closed after a federal safety investigation. The bolt was engineered to hold under normal vibration loads, then progressively loosen under the specific frequency generated at highway speeds above 70 miles per hour. In other words, the car would drive fine in city traffic. On a highway, the brake line would begin to separate. In 2 weeks, perhaps 3, and then the brakes would fail at the exact moment when failing brakes were most dangerous. Marcus did not move for a full 30 seconds. He thought about the 3-car accident on Route 9 inches 2016, the investigation report he'd read afterward, during his contracting days, that had identified unusual mechanical failure as the cause. The way the file had been closed faster than made sense. He thought about a lot of things. Lying on cold concrete under a stranger's car in the middle of the night. Then he reached up and removed the bolt from the bracket, careful to handle it only at the thread end. He tucked it into his breast pocket, slid out from under the vehicle, and stood. He looked at it under the fluorescent light for a moment. Small, unremarkable to anyone who didn't know what they were looking at. Across the garage, through the glass doors of the elevator lobby, a figure was standing in the shadows beside the column. Marcus looked up. The figure was already turning away, raising something to their face. A phone, or a camera. Gone before Marcus could be certain. He stood alone in the garage, one hand around a bolt that shouldn't exist, rain audible somewhere above him through the ventilation ducts. His phone buzzed. He already knew who it was. "Daddy, I forgot the part about the wheat fields," Lily said. "Can you help me practice when you get home?" "Yeah, baby," he said. "I'll be there. Give me an hour." He slipped the bolt into his pocket and went back for his mop. Number Part 2. The Woman Who Trusts No One. Elena Brooks had not slept more than 5 consecutive hours since January. She was 34 years old, which in her industry meant she was simultaneously too young to be taken seriously and too old to be excused for not having more experience. She wore her dark hair pulled back in a way that communicated efficiency rather than aesthetics. Her clothes were expensive and functional. Her office, on the 32nd floor of the Brooks Dynamics headquarters, was large, and she rarely sat in it. She had inherited the company from her father, Gordon Brooks, who had died in a car accident 6 years ago. A wet road, a guardrail, a drop of 40 feet into a ravine. The company had been in quiet crisis since then, not failing, but drifting, losing the sharpness that Gordon had given it. Elena had spent 3 years stabilizing the finances and another 2 trying to grow. Now the company was under scrutiny from a financial oversight committee. The stock had dropped 11% since Q4, and the board of directors had been meeting without her in the small conference room on the 29th floor. She was aware of all of it. She was aware of almost everything, which was part of the problem. Awareness was exhausting when you had no one to share it with. Richard Kane, her chief financial officer, had been with the company since her father's time. He was 61 years old, heavy through the chest, with the smooth social manner of a man who had spent 4 decades learning how to be in the same room as powerful people. He smiled at the right moments. He answered questions with other questions. Elena did not trust him, but she had not yet found a reason to fire him that would survive the board's scrutiny. She was thinking about Richard when she stepped off the elevator into the executive garage the next morning and found Marcus Hale standing beside her SUV. "Ma'am," he said. The way he always said it, not deferential, just accurate. She stopped. "What are you doing?" "I was going to tell you," he said. And his voice was different from the voice she expected, lower and more direct. "That your vehicle has a brake line issue. I found it last night. You shouldn't drive it until it's inspected." Elena looked at him. She had spoken to him perhaps 6 times in 2 years, always briefly. always in the context of some maintenance request. She had no particular impression of him beyond competence and quietness. "A brake line issue," she said. "Yes, ma'am. My fleet manager inspected every executive vehicle last week. Nothing was flagged." "I know. This wasn't there last week." He paused. "Someone put it there." She looked at him for a longer moment. He met her eyes without difficulty, which was either confidence or indifference, and she couldn't tell which. "I'll have the vehicle looked at," she said. "I'd ask that you don't use the company mechanics for this particular inspection," he said. She studied him. "Why?" "Because I don't know yet how far back this goes." She said nothing for a moment. Outside the garage, through the ventilation shaft, she could hear rain resuming. "My name is Marcus Hale," he said, as if she didn't know. "I know your name," she said. She got into a company sedan instead and drove to her 7 o'clock meeting without mentioning the conversation to anyone. But she thought about it. All morning she thought about it. Marcus spent his lunch break in the maintenance office with the door closed, cross-referencing brake inspection records against the fleet maintenance log. He had access to both because he had access to the maintenance database. It was part of his job to log cleaning and basic upkeep. Nobody had thought to restrict it because nobody thought of him as someone who would read it carefully. He found 4 entries flagged as completed that he knew, from his own movement through the garage, had not actually taken place. Routine checks, signed off, dated precisely, but he had been in that garage on those dates. He would have seen the work being done. He hadn't. Someone was fabricating maintenance records. He photographed the screen with his personal phone. He looked at the photographs for a moment, then looked at the bolt, which was sitting on the desk in front of him, wrapped in a clean rag. He had looked it up last night, after Lily was asleep. The manufacturer code stamped on the base of the bolt nearly invisible, requiring a loop to read corresponded to a now defunct company called Prescott Mechanical Components. The company had been the subject of a NHTSA investigation in 2016 related to mechanical failure in commercial vehicles. The investigation had been closed without public findings, which was unusual. Marcus had found one forum post from 2017 written by an anonymous user, claiming that the closure had followed significant legal pressure from connected parties. The post had received no replies. The user had not posted again. 3 people had died in the accident that triggered the initial investigation. A family in a minivan on Route 9 inches western Ohio. Marcus thought about that for a long time. At 3:45, his phone rang. An unfamiliar number. "This is Elena Brooks," said the voice on the other end. "I'd like to continue our conversation from this morning. Privately. Can you be at Lot C at 4:15? He was. Number. Part 3. What the road reveals. She told him about the board meeting the following Wednesday. She told him that Richard Kane had proposed, at a board meeting she had been excluded from, that the company pursue an accelerated merger with a private equity group that would effectively remove her from executive authority. She told him that the proposal had failed by 1 vote, but that the pressure had not stopped. He listened without interrupting. He was leaning against the wall of the parking structure, arms folded, watching her face rather than the middle distance, which most people did when they didn't know what to say. 2 nights ago, she said, I drove home from a dinner meeting at 11:30, on Meridian Bridge. I had a moment where the steering felt loose, for about 2 seconds. Then, it corrected. Marcus was quiet. I assumed I was tired, she said. You weren't tired, he said. She looked at him. The bolt I found was designed for progressive failure. It wouldn't have caused full brake loss, not immediately. It would have created degradation, increasing instability over 2 to 3 weeks. What you felt on the bridge was the beginning. She was very still. How do you know this? Because I've seen this before, he said. Not exactly this, but close enough. He told her about the Route 9 accident. Not everything, just enough. She listened with the focused attention of someone who processed information quickly and had learned not to show what it did to her. You think this is connected to Brooks Dynamics, she said. I think someone wanted to make a brake failure look like negligence. Your company's negligence. On a vehicle carrying you. She thought about that. If I died in a vehicle registered to my company, On company business. The liability would fall on the company, Marcus said, not on whoever caused it. And the insurance policy on my life, she said slowly. He looked at her. Tell me about that. She paused for a moment, as if deciding how much to give him. Then, my father took out a key person insurance policy on himself when he founded the company. When he died, that policy paid out. I restructured it when I took over. Standard corporate policy covers senior executives, including me. The company is the beneficiary. How much? She was quiet for a moment. $19 million. Marcus said nothing. The policy was amended 8 months ago, she said. I didn't do it. I found out when I was reviewing the CFO's quarterly report. The amendment increased the payout from 11 million to 19 and changed the terms to include death by accident. Kane signed off on it? Yes. The rain had started again, audible on the parking structure's roof in irregular percussion. Marcus looked at the floor for a moment, working something through. I need to see the camera footage from the executive garage, he said. The night I found the bolt. That footage is managed by building security, she said. I can access it. Before you do, he said, don't tell anyone you're looking. She gave him a look that was somewhere between irritation and reassessment. I know how to be discreet, Mr. Hale. I know you do, he said. I'm saying it anyway. The footage, when Elena pulled it the following morning, showed Richard Kane in the executive garage at 11:47 p.m., 2 hours before Marcus had found the bolt. Kane had spent 4 minutes in the vicinity of Elena's SUV before moving toward the elevator. He had not looked at any of the other vehicles. His movement had been deliberate and unhurried, which was somehow worse than urgency would have been. Elena sent Marcus a screenshot with no message attached. He looked at it for a long time. Number part 4. The shape of the thing. They met in the maintenance office 3 days later. Marcus had swept the room for anything electronic that shouldn't be there, a habit from a previous life that he'd never fully discarded. He'd found nothing. He'd checked twice anyway. He had spread his findings on the work table. Photographs of the maintenance log, a printed timeline he'd constructed from public records, and internal documents Elena had forwarded him, the bolt in its clean rag, and a handwritten list of 6 vehicle accidents involving Brooks Dynamics fleet vehicles over the past 7 years. Elena stood across the table from him, studying the list. 3 of these were declared accidents, she said. 2 were attributed to driver error, and 1 was never publicly classified, Marcus said, pointing to the 5th entry. December 2018. A senior accounts manager named Dennis Whitfield. Single vehicle accident on I-74. He died. I remember. I was still in transition then. Richard handled the communications. I found Whitfield's name in a document your father kept in an off-site storage unit. He said it carefully. Watching her face, she looked up. How did you find that? I talked to your father's assistant, the one who retired in 2019. She kept a copy of his personal files because she was worried they'd disappear. He paused. She was right to be worried. The originals are gone. Elena was quiet for a moment. What was in the document? Notes. Your father was building a case against a fraudulent insurance claim scheme. He had identified a pattern of manufactured vehicle accidents across multiple companies, all insured by the same underwriter. He called it a systematic liability to payout operation. Marcus tapped the list. These accidents match his pattern exactly. The room was very still. He died 6 years ago, Elena said. Yes. Inakar accident. Yes. She did not look away from the list. Her jaw was set, and he could see the muscles working at the corners. He gave her time. Richard was with the company when my father died, she said finally. He was CFO. My father trusted him. A short pause. I never did. I kept him because removing him would have destabilized the board before I had enough support. She looked up. I should have moved faster. You didn't know what you were looking for, Marcus said. It wasn't consolation. It was just true. She looked at the bolt in its rag. What do you need from me? Access to the procurement records for the past 8 years. Specifically, any orders for non-standard mechanical components. That'll take time to pull without triggering a review flag. I know. I also need the name of whoever Kane coordinates with outside the company. He's not running this alone. The scheme is too large and too consistent across too many years. Someone with insurance industry access is directing traffic. She nodded slowly. I have someone who might know. An accountant named Patricia Voss, who was on the compliance team 3 years ago. She left suddenly. I always assumed it was a compensation dispute. But, find her, Marcus said. He started gathering the papers. Mr. Hale, Elena said. He stopped. Why are you doing this? She asked. The question was genuine, not rhetorical. She really wanted to know. He thought about it honestly. Because the people who did this are still doing it, he said. And somebody's going to get hurt, who doesn't deserve to. She nodded once, as if that was enough. He had dinner with Lily that evening. She had macaroni and cheese, and he had whatever she'd left, and she narrated the entire second act of the Prairie play between bites. He listened and laughed at the right places and helped her remember the Wheatfield speech, which she delivered standing on her chair with absolute conviction. After she was in bed, he sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and thought about Gordon Brooks, a man he'd never met, who had seen the same shape in the darkness that Marcus could now see clearly, a man who had tried to stop it and hadn't made it out. Marcus was not afraid in any simple sense, but he was aware of what he was carrying. He'd been aware since the night he found the bolt. He went to bed at midnight. At 2 in the morning, he woke to the sound of something in the apartment that was not Lily's breathing. He was up and moving before he was fully conscious. Down the hall, into Lily's room, she was asleep, undisturbed. He stood there for a moment, then moved through the apartment carefully. No one was there. The front door was locked. The deadbolt was engaged. But on the kitchen table, beside his coffee cup, there was a playing card, a jack of spades. Face down, he had not left it there. He called Elena at 2:15 a.m. She answered on the second ring. Someone was in my apartment, he said. A pause. Are you and Lily safe? Yes. But I need you to do something for me. What? Find somewhere safe for her to stay. Starting tomorrow. Number, Part 5, Pressure. Lily called it a sleepover at Miss Clara's, which was technically accurate. Clara Donahue was Lily's teacher's aide and had been willing, when Elena called her and explained a carefully edited version of the situation, to host Lily for a few days while some family logistics were sorted. Lily had been thrilled. She'd packed her stuffed rabbit and 6 library books and her script. Marcus had held her an extra beat when he dropped her off, and she'd squirmed impatiently, and then hugged him back hard. He drove away without looking in the rear-view mirror. Patricia Voss, the former compliance accountant, lived in a suburb outside Indianapolis. She was 47, quiet on the phone, and deeply reluctant. Elena had called her. The call had lasted 20 minutes. At the end of it, Voss had agreed to meet. They drove together, Marcus and Elena, in a rental car that Elena had booked under a name from her personal account. It was the first extended time they'd spent in proximity. The silence was not uncomfortable. Marcus had noticed that Elena was a person who did not fill silence unnecessarily, which he respected. Halfway there, she said, "My father used to say that companies aren't organisms. They don't have self-preservation instincts. The people in them do." Marcus glanced at her. He was right. I thought he was being cynical, she said. I was 28. I thought I understood things. She looked out the window. He was trying to warn me. Marcus said nothing. There was nothing useful to say. Voss met them in a diner outside Fisher's. She was small and precise, with the alert eyes of someone who had spent years looking at discrepancies in numbers. She drank black coffee, and she looked at Marcus and Elena for a long time before she spoke. I left because I was afraid, she said. Simple as that. I found something in the liability accounts that didn't make sense. And when I brought it to Richard, he spent 45 minutes being very calm and reasonable, and explaining why I was misreading it. And then the next week, my position was restructured. What did you find? Elena asked. Recurring payments to a company called Sentinel Risk Solutions. quarterly disbursements going back 6 years. The amounts varied but averaged around $80,000 per quarter, coded as consulting fees. Do you know what Sentinel Risk Solutions is? I looked it up after I left. It's registered in Delaware, minimal public footprint. But the registered agent is a law firm called Greer and Harlow. She paused. Greer and Harlow represents the primary underwriter on your company's fleet insurance policy. The diner was busy around them, filling with lunch traffic, the noise of it insulating their table in its own small privacy. They were paying the law firm that represents their own insurance underwriter, Elena said. Through a shell company, yes, which means someone on your company's side was coordinating with someone on the insurance underwriter's side to, I can only guess at the purpose, to create and process fraudulent accident claims, Marcus said. Voss looked at him. That's what I guessed, she said. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud at the time. Are you ready now? A long pause. The coffee cup turning in her hands. If you can guarantee that what I give you goes somewhere it can actually do something, she said. Then yes. I need everything you kept, Marcus said. Whatever copies you made before you left. She reached into her bag and put a flash drive on the table. Number part 6. The threat arrives delivered. The text message came to Marcus's phone at 6:47 the following morning. The number was blocked. Asterisk. You found something that isn't yours. Put it back where it belongs and go back to sweeping floors. Your daughter is at 1412 Clement Avenue. We know her teacher's name. We know her schedule. Asterisk. Marcus read it 3 times. His hands were steady. He called Elena. They know about Lily, he said. A pause. Where is she now? Still at Clara's. I need to move her. I'll call my personal assistant. I have a property, a house outside the city, that no one in the company knows about. I've never used it. It's registered under a family trust. Can you trust your assistant? Completely. A beat. She's the only person in my professional life I can say that without qualification. Do it, he said. I'll meet you there in 2 hours. He called Clara Donahue next. Clara was already worried she was a perceptive woman, and children's instincts are catching. Lily had woken in the night and asked when her dad was coming. Marcus spoke to Lily for 10 minutes while Clara packed her bag. Are we going on an adventure? Lily asked. Kind of, he said. Is it a scary adventure or a fun adventure? Mostly fun, he said. There's a house with a big yard. Is there a dog? I don't know yet. If there's a dog, it's definitely fun, she said, with the certainty of a person who has thought deeply about this. There was no dog, but there was a yard and a tire swing, and Lily occupied herself with it for the remainder of the afternoon while Marcus and Elena worked at the kitchen table inside. Elena's personal assistant, a woman named Joanna Marsh, had delivered the flash drive contents to a secure cloud partition. Marcus went through the financial records, while Elena cross-referenced the procurement database she'd pulled from the company server. What they found took 2 hours to build into a coherent shape, and once it had a shape it was unmistakable. Over 7 years, Brooks Dynamics had made quarterly payments, always coded as consulting or compliance fees to Sentinel Risk Solutions, which funneled a percentage to Greer and Harlow, which employed a senior claims adjuster who had processed 6 of the 7 vehicle accident claims involving Brooks Dynamics fleet vehicles. 6 of the 7 accidents had resulted in insurance payouts averaging $1.2 million per incident. The 7th, Dennis Whitfield's death on I-74 inches 2018 had resulted in a payout of $4 million. The total over 7 years was slightly over $11 million. The amended life insurance policy on Elena, signed by Richard Kane, represented a potential payout of $19 million larger than anything that had come before. A culminating move. He's been building toward this, Elena said quietly. Marcus looked at the numbers. The earlier accidents were small. Proof of concept. Establishing the relationship with the insurance side. Building a track record of successful claims. He tapped the final entry. This was always where it was going. Elena stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Lily was pushing herself on the tire swing, tilting her head back to look at the sky. The sound of it, the creak of the rope, The occasional squeak of delight drifted through the glass. My father knew, Elena said. He had the same shape of it that we have now. He was going to go to the FBI, and someone found out before he could. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Richard Kane called her at 8:15 that evening, professionally pleasant, asking about a board presentation for the following Thursday. Elena responded normally, giving nothing. When she hung up, she looked at Marcus. He doesn't know how much we have, she said. Not yet. If he finds out, he won't find out from me. Her phone buzzed again. She looked at it, and something shifted in her face. A tightening, controlled immediately. What? Marcus said. It's from David Cho, my executive assistant. She looked up. The camera footage from the garage, the footage showing Kane near my vehicle, is gone. The backup server shows a recording error on the night in question. Marcus was quiet for a moment. They're moving faster, he said. Yes. Then we have to move faster. Number part 7. The soldier's memory. The bolt had been sitting on the kitchen table beside the financial records for 2 days. Marcus picked it up that evening and looked at it under the table lamp. He'd looked at it a dozen times, but now he was looking for something specific. The manufacturer's code was stamped in a nearly invisible font on the flat face of the hex recess. He'd identified it as Prescott Mechanical Components. What he hadn't pursued was the serial batch number, a secondary sequence of characters that ran alongside the manufacturer code. He got out his loupe, held the bolt under the lamp at the right angle. The batch number started with a prefix he recognized. *MIL 2014*. Military procurement, fiscal year 2014. He'd handled orders with that prefix during his contracting work. These bolts had been ordered through a military supply channel and then sold outside the legitimate supply chain to a private buyer. He pulled out his phone and called a man named George Tully, who had worked in military vehicle maintenance alongside Marcus from 2011 to 2015 and now ran a small parts supply operation in Cincinnati. The MIL 2014 Prescott batch, Marcus said. What happened to the civilian diversion sales? Tully was quiet for a moment. That's a very old question. I know. They traced most of that batch to a broker in Pittsburgh, but there were about 400 units unaccounted for. The broker's name? Company called Vance Industrial. Been closed since 2017. The principal was a man named Robert Fenn. A pause. Fenn went through bankruptcy and disappeared from public record in 2018. If I needed to find what happened to the unaccounted units, I'd look at who bought Vance Industrial's receivables in the bankruptcy sale, Tully said. That's where the customer records would have gone. Can you find that? Give me until tomorrow morning. Marcus put down the phone. Elena was in the doorway, watching him. Vance Industrial's bankruptcy receivables, he said. Someone bought them, which means someone has the customer list for those bolt sales. If we can identify everyone who bought from that batch, we can show that the purchases were deliberate, not coincidental. This wasn't one person having a connection to a defunct parts manufacturer. It was a sourced supply chain for sabotage components. Elena was quiet for a moment. That's the connection between Kane and the insurance side. They didn't just share a corrupt relationship with an adjuster. They had a shared logistics operation, an operation that someone set up, financed, and maintained for years. Kane isn't smart enough for that, she said. He's capable. He's meticulous. But the architecture of this, it's too large for him. So who? She thought for a long time. Martin Greer, she said finally. Senior partner at Greer & Harlow. He's been the company's legal counsel for 12 years. He was my father's personal attorney before that. A pause. He was at the funeral. He gave a eulogy. Marcus felt something go cold and flat in his chest. He was at the funeral, he said. Yes. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Tully called back the following morning with the name of the entity that had acquired Vance Industrial's bankruptcy receivables, a holding company called Meridian Asset Group, registered in Nevada. Meridian Asset Group, according to Elena's research, had two principals. One was a silent investor whose identity was shielded through a nominee structure. The other was a named director. Martin AWWW, Greer. They had their architect. Patricia Voss agreed to sign a formal statement. She sent it, notarized and witnessed, to Elena via secure encrypted email. Marcus photographed the bolt's batch number with a scale reference and documented his chain of custody from the night he'd found it. He wrote a 6-page technical summary explaining what the bolt was, what it did, and how he knew. He sent it to an encrypted drive that Elena had set up with Joanna Marsh's help. At 4 in the afternoon, Elena called her FBI field contact, a special agent she'd spoken to once before, about an unrelated corporate matter. She gave him enough to get a preliminary conversation. He listened for 11 minutes without interrupting. "Can you have documentation to me by tomorrow morning?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "Don't tell anyone else. Don't move the primary evidence." "Understood." She hung up and looked at Marcus. For the first time since this had started, something in her face was close to relief. Then her phone rang again. An unknown number. She answered it. "Miss Brooks," said a voice she didn't recognize. "This is a courtesy call. The man you've been consulting with, he has a daughter. She's at a property registered to your family trust. We'd like you to deliver the documentation you've been compiling to a specific location before 7 o'clock tonight. Or we'll need to have a more direct conversation with Mr. Hale." The line went dead. Elena put the phone down. She looked at Marcus. He was already on his feet. Number. Part 8. What mechanics know about leverage. The property was a commercial storage facility outside the city, a cluster of container warehouses on 12 acres of fenced land off an industrial access road. Marcus had driven past it once in his life, 2 years ago, taking a different route home. He had no reason to know it. But George Tully did. It was adjacent to a parts supplier Tully had done business with, and Tully had the address in his records. The trace to the address had taken Joanna Marsh 40 minutes, using corporate database access that Elena authorized from the car. The call had been routed through a number registered to a subsidiary of Meridian Asset Group. The facility was leased under the same subsidiary. Marcus called the FBI agent directly. He was not calm, but he was precise. He gave the address. He gave everything they had: the drive location, the passcode, the Voss statement, the bolt documentation. He gave it in 2 minutes flat and did not repeat himself. The agent said, "Do not go to that location, Mr. Hale." Marcus said, "My daughter is 8 years old." A pause. "We can have units there in 25 minutes. She's 8 years old," Marcus said again. He ended the call. Elena was looking at him from the passenger seat. "You're going," she said. "Yes. I'll call them again. And I'm calling a journalist I trust. Whatever happens, the documentation goes out tonight." He looked at her. "You have the drive information." "Yes. If I don't, you will," she said, not to reassure him, because she was choosing to say it. He left her at the access road with the rental car and went the remaining 300 yards on foot. The facility was mostly dark. 2 container warehouses and a central processing building with a corrugated roof. One light was on a portable work lamp, the kind used on construction sites, positioned inside the open doors of the larger warehouse. Marcus could see the silhouette of a figure moving inside. He did not go directly to the light. He moved along the fence line, staying low, using the containers for cover. He was thinking the whole time, not frantically, but with the focused pragmatism of someone who had spent years around machinery and had learned that machines operated according to principles, and principles could be worked with. The warehouse had a hydraulic container positioning system. He'd recognized it from outside the overhead rail and the crane arm that allowed containers to be moved within the warehouse. It ran on a pneumatic mechanism. He'd worked on a similar system at a freight yard in 2013. He found the pressure valve on the exterior of the building in 30 seconds. He found the manual override for the crane arm in 45. He did not touch them yet. He kept moving. Through a gap in the corrugated wall at the back of the warehouse, he could see Richard Kane. Kane was standing 10 feet from Lily, who was sitting on a metal folding chair with her stuffed rabbit in her lap, looking at Kane with an expression that Marcus recognized as his daughter at her most precisely angry, not crying, not afraid, just furious in the silent way she'd inherited from him. She was not hurt. She was okay. Marcus exhaled one long breath. There was another man in the warehouse younger, standing near the door, watching the access road, armed, waiting for Marcus to arrive at the front. Marcus went back to the pressure valve. He opened it 70%, not full, which would have been dangerous, but enough to build pressure in the crane arm system quickly. Then he moved to the crane arm override panel and activated the secondary release, which, in the operational absence of a load, would cause the crane arm to traverse its full range at speed and impact the container guides on the far end of the track. The noise it made was enormous. Metal on metal, a clanging crash that echoed across the facility like a gunshot. The guard at the door spun toward it and moved into the warehouse, hand at his hip. Marcus was already inside and moving. He came from the gap in the wall, low and fast across 20 feet of concrete, and he took Kane by the collar before Kane fully understood what was happening. He positioned himself between Kane and the approaching guard. "Lily," he said, "come here." She was off the chair and moving before he finished the word. She grabbed his sleeve with both hands and did not make a sound. "The FBI is 4 minutes away," Marcus said to Kane. His voice was entirely level. "Your associate can run, or he can stay. That's his decision. Yours is whether you want to be standing here when they arrive." Kane looked at him for a long moment. In the light of the work lamp, his face was the face of a man who had run calculations his whole life and had just reached the end of them. "Greer set the whole thing up," Kane said. He didn't say it desperately. He said it with the matter-of-factness of a man beginning to negotiate. "I was an operator. I handled the internal side. He handled the insurance end and the legal cover. Tell that to the FBI," Marcus said. "Gordon Brooks found out in 2018. Greer said we had to." He stopped. Started again. "Greer said it was the only option." Marcus felt Lily's hands tighten on his sleeve. "And my father?" said Elena's voice from the warehouse doors. She was standing there. She had not stayed at the car. Behind her, through the open doors, the distant pulse of emergency lights was visible at the far end of the access road. Kane looked at her for a long time. "I'm sorry," he said. And possibly he meant it. Number Part 9. The Reckoning. The FBI arrived in force. Marcus stood with Lily outside the warehouse, her head against his chest, his arm around her shoulders. She was completely still in the way she sometimes went. Still not frightened, but processing. He could feel her thinking. "Were those the bad guys?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "Are they going to jail?" "Yes." "Good," she said, and said nothing else for a while. Inside, agents were moving with the deliberate efficiency of people who had prepared for this. Elena was speaking to the agent in charge, calm and thorough, giving the documentation chain and the contacts and the name Martin Greer in a voice that did not waver. Richard Kane was in handcuffs in the back of a federal vehicle, talking. He had been talking since the moment the agents arrived. Whether it would help him, that was for other people to decide. Martin Greer was arrested at his home at 10:41 that evening while he was on the phone with a colleague. The colleague later said that Greer had seemed distracted in the final minutes of the call, as if he already knew something was coming and was trying to finish a sentence before it arrived. The claims adjuster at the insurance underwriter, a man named Philip Daltrey, who had processed every fraudulent claim with meticulous paperwork, turned himself in the following morning after speaking to a lawyer who advised him that cooperation was his only viable option. He brought records. The records were extensive. They were also definitive. The scheme had generated $11.3 million in fraudulent payouts over 7 years. The intended final transaction, Elena's death, coded in Kane's internal notes as executive transition, would have brought the total to $30 million. The $19 million policy payout was only part of it. The remainder would have come from an accelerated corporate acquisition, priced favorably for the acquiring group, which was itself a subsidiary of Meridian Asset Group. Martin Greer had been planning to buy the company at a discount using money generated by the company's own fraudulent insurance claims, following the death of its CEO, with Kane installed as interim executive to smooth the transition. It was, in its way, almost elegant. The kind of scheme that required years of patience and a fundamental conviction that no one would look closely enough. Marcus Hale had looked closely. Elena sat in the back of a federal vehicle at 1 in the morning, giving a statement. When she was done, she walked out to where Marcus was standing with Lily, who had fallen asleep in a camp chair that an agent had produced from somewhere. Elena looked at them for a moment without speaking. "Your father," Marcus said quietly. "I know," she said. She sat down in the grass beside the chair, arms around her knees. Not the posture of a CEO. Just a person at the end of a very long thing. I know what he would have said. What? He used to say that the only people worth having in your corner are the ones who show up without being asked. She looked up at Marcus. He would have liked you. Marcus didn't know what to say to that. He rarely did, with things that were true and important. "Get some sleep," he said. "There's going to be a lot of tomorrow." There was. Number Part 10. What Remains. The story broke across every major business news outlet by 7 a.m., fed by Elena's journalist contact and supported by the documentation that Joanna Marsh had released at midnight. By 9, the Brooks Dynamics stock had dropped again, briefly, before stabilizing as analysts began to understand that the fraud had been perpetrated against the company rather than by it. By noon, it had recovered to within 2 points of its pre-crisis level. By the following week, it was higher than it had been in 4 years. The board of directors convened an emergency session. Elena attended. She was precise, thorough, and entirely without deference. 3 members who had ties to Kane's internal network resigned before the end of the meeting. The others voted unanimously to support her continued leadership. She replaced the entire senior compliance team. She hired a forensic accounting firm to audit every year of Richard Kane's tenure. She personally called Patricia Voss and offered her a senior position in the restructured compliance department. Voss took 2 days to consider it and then said yes. Marcus's arrest record, he'd been briefly detained and then released during the investigation, based on manufactured evidence that Kane's team had planted, was formally expunged. The detective who'd handled his detention called to apologize. Marcus accepted the apology without drama. He returned to the Brooks Dynamics garage on a Monday morning, 3 weeks after the arrests. He was there before anyone else arrived, which was normal. He unlocked the maintenance office and stood for a moment in the familiar smell of the place. His phone rang. "Elena, don't sweep anything today," she said. "Why not?" "Because I need you to come to the 32nd floor at 9 a.m. He arrived at 9 a.m. The executive floor was quieter than usual. There were still absences where the departed member's staff had been. Elena's office looked the same as he imagined it always had. He'd never been in it before. She was standing at the window, looking at the city. She turned when he came in. "I have a proposition," she said. "I'm listening. Director of Technical Safety and Operations. It's a new position. I created it this morning." She sat at her desk, which was a clear signal that this was a professional conversation and she intended to treat it that way. The role covers vehicle fleet integrity, facility, safety auditing, and operational risk assessment. It requires someone who understands mechanical systems at a detailed level and who has the judgment to identify anomalies that trained specialists might overlook. Marcus said nothing. "The salary is considerably more than what you're currently earning," she said. "There's a benefit structure and an office on the 14th floor. You would report directly to me." He looked at her for a moment. "I'm a janitor. You were a military vehicle mechanic, a private contractor, and the person who identified and documented a 7-year criminal enterprise operating inside this company," she said. The janitor part was incidental. He almost smiled at that. "I need to think about it," he said. "Of course." He turned to go. "Mr. Hale," she said. He stopped. "Lily's play is Thursday evening," she said. "I found out from Joanna. I thought if she wanted an audience." She stopped. "I've never been to a school play. I don't know if there's a protocol." He looked at her for a moment. She was looking at her desk, which was the first time he'd seen her avoid his eyes. "You show up," he said. "That's the protocol." She looked up. 7 o'clock, he said. "It's at Franklin Elementary. There's a parking lot." She nodded. The auditorium was full, in the way that school auditoriums are full, chaotic, warm, smelling of folding chairs and someone's popcorn, and the particular indoor rain smell of wet umbrellas drying against walls. Marcus found a seat in the third row. He had not told Lily that Elena was coming, because he wanted Lily's performance to be about Lily. Elena arrived at 6:58, looking entirely unlike herself, less composed, more uncertain, wearing a jacket that was slightly less formal than her work wardrobe, as if she'd tried twice, and settled on the version that seemed least likely to be wrong. She spotted Marcus and made her way to the empty seat beside him, with a slight expression of relief. "Is this the right row?" she whispered. "There are no wrong rows," he said. "It's a second-grade play." "I brought flowers," she said, showing him a small wrapped bunch she'd been carrying at her side. "Is that?" "It's perfect," he said. She settled into the seat. The lights went down. The music started, someone's laptop playing the opening theme too loud, then adjusted. And then the curtain opened, and there was a backdrop of paper wheat and painted sky. And there was Lily in a blue dress, standing at the edge of the stage with her hands clasped and her chin lifted. She began to speak. Her voice was steady and clear and entirely certain, the way she was certain about the things that mattered to her. She said the lines she'd been practicing at the breakfast table, in the car, in the house, with the tire swing. She said them like she meant everyone. Marcus watched his daughter and did not look away. Beside him, he heard Elena take a slow breath. He didn't turn to check, but he could tell from the sound of it that she was okay. After the curtain call, after Lily had taken her bow and scanned the audience with the unself-conscious thoroughness of a child looking for one specific face, and found it, and broken into a grin that was missing the two front teeth, Marcus stood, and Elena stood beside him. Lily ran up the aisle and launched herself, and Marcus caught her, and she was laughing. "Did you see my bow?" she demanded. "I practiced the bow for 3 days. The bow was the best part," Marcus said. Lily looked past him at Elena. Direct. Uncomplicated. Curious. "Are you my dad's friend?" she asked. Elena considered this with a seriousness that matched Lily's. "I think so," she said. "I'm still figuring out the details." Lily accepted this with the pragmatism of a child who has learned that adults are often still figuring things out. She held out the stuffed rabbit. "This is Gerald," she said. "He came to the play too." "I'm glad he could make it," Elena said. "Gerald seems important." "He's crucial," Lily said. Marcus watched the two of them and felt something in his chest that he didn't name. He didn't need to name it. It was there, and it was enough. Outside, in the parking lot, the air was cool and clear. The rain had not come tonight. The sky above the city was dark, but not heavy. Lily was running ahead toward the car, Gerald swinging from one hand, the flowers from Elena in the other. Elena walked beside Marcus. "She's extraordinary," she said quietly. "I know," he said. A pause. The sound of Lily's shoes on the asphalt, her small voice narrating something to the rabbit. "Do you think," Elena started. Stopped. Started again. "Do you think people can actually change?" "Not improve. Change." At the foundation, Marcus thought about it. The honest version of the answer, not the easy one. "I think some things that look like change are just permission," he said. "You already were the person. You just needed a reason to be it." She was quiet for a moment. "Is that what happened to you?" she asked. "I stopped pretending that being small was the same as being safe," he said, "after Diane. After I almost missed everything." He looked at Lily, who had found a particularly interesting piece of parking lot gravel and was examining it with great scientific attention. "Took me a while to figure out that showing up was the job. Not just for her. For everything." Elena listened to that. She didn't respond immediately, which meant she was treating it seriously, and he appreciated that. "I'm going to take the job," he said. "In case you were wondering." She turned her head. The closest she'd come to a genuine smile in 3 weeks. "I wasn't worried," she said. "Yes, you were." She didn't argue. Lily looked up from her gravel. "Dad, can we get pancakes? It's 8:30. "Pancakes are around-the-clock food," Lily said. with great conviction. Marcus looked at Elena. She's not wrong, Elena said. They got pancakes. Months later, on a morning in early autumn, with the trees beginning to change outside the 14th floor window, that was now his window, Marcus Hale would find a bolt on his desk. Not a threatening one. A different one. Clean and correct and properly manufactured. Left there with a note from Elena that said, only, asterisk. For the record. E. Asterisk. He would put it in his desk drawer, where it would stay. It was a small thing. The kind of thing you wouldn't notice if you weren't paying attention. Marcus Hale had always paid attention. That was, in the end, the whole story. Asterisk. Word count. Approximately 8,000 words. Asterisk.